Today on CityCast Pittsburgh, our town has an incredible park system and so many beautiful outdoor spaces, but they're not always welcoming to every Pittsburgher. I'm with someone who wants to make our great outdoors a lot more inclusive. It's Monday, April 17th. I'm Megan Harris, and here's what Pittsburgh's talking about. I'm here with Marcus Schaffner, the founder of the Outdoor Inclusion Coalition here in Pittsburgh. Marcus, thanks for meeting me downtown.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for the time. Happy to be in the space with you.
Yeah, for sure. So we are sitting in one of Pittsburgh's oldest high-rises, but let's pretend for a minute that we're somewhere else. Can you describe for me your perfect day outdoors in or around Pittsburgh?
Oh, that's an easy one. Frick Environmental Center, for sure. I love sitting out on the patio of the Environmental Center and looking into the trees. There's plenty of natural habitat there, especially the birds. I can say I'm like slightly interested in birding. So
I like that. Yeah. What is it about, Frick Park and the spaces outdoor here in Pittsburgh that do speak to you? Because we have like this really rich environmental kind of atmosphere. But, as you well know, it's not always as accessible to everyone in the way that we want it to be.
Right. Yeah. It's an interesting dichotomy here in Pittsburgh because I think, the sheer size and quantity of public access land. So they say in Pittsburgh is pretty high, but quality-wise, there's a great discrepancy. The things that appeal to me specifically is some of these regional parks that transcend multiple neighborhoods and the intersections of people to meet in a common space, hopefully to speak, to recreate, and to commune in a space that historically hasn't been representative of everyone, but they provide so much, social, emotional learning of yourself, but also just the health benefits, quality air, quality water, quality recreation is important for all of us to succeed. So,
yeah. I mean, I hear your skepticism when you say, so they say public access. What do you feel like is missing here in the city? What do you want to see more of, less of?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, proximal quality experiences is important. Something in your backyard that looks like everybody else's backyard, but capitalizing on the natural amenity in that space. I think everyone deserves a playground, but not every playground is going to look the same, but it should be of quality.
Yeah.
But I also think that exploration comes in many types and forms. There should be connections to our regional parks, our state parks, our national parks. And that comes in multiple different forms of public transit, but also just safe access ways to get there. Through multimodal transportation, like a bike, to preserve our spaces. But that's important, and not every neighborhood has that. So,
well, I've seen you talk about how, in our nation's most populated cities, non-white neighborhoods in particular have so much less park acreage. I think it was 44% nationally. You've lived outside of Pittsburgh. How do you find the city stacks up, compared to something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think Pittsburgh has a ton of resources. Like, if you think of public access lands, I mean, I think Pennsylvania as a state is in the top 10.
Mm-hmm.
There's a ton of statistics that just states that if you can get there, we have it type of ordeal. And that comes
But that's a big barrier.
That's
around
a huge
here.
barrier. We've got a lot to boast about and to speak about, but we just have to improve the way that people connect to those spaces. So.
Yeah, I mean, there are, as you said, a ton of parks all over the city, but they don't always get the resources you think they need.
Yeah.
Homewood, Bells Hoover, Spring Hill, Hill District. There was a Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy analysis that pinpointed those in particular and said they need a lot more than others. Just giving an equal distribution of resources is not enough. You need an equitable one.
Exactly. Because you think of Riverview Park as a great example with landslide mitigation, there's
Have
a
they
lot.
fixed that road back there? Because it's been in pieces
Yeah.
and covered by traffic cones for the better part of 3 years.
It's finally fixed, but I can't say that. Yeah, yeah. Landslides are something that are inevitable, but it has to be intentional mitigation strategies in place to preserve these spaces. Simply put, a one-way road of that type that goes away, that's half the community that has inaccessibility to a park. So
Yeah, you're in a real pickle if you don't have that road.
no doubt. Yeah. And just the road is one piece, but there's a lot of other things that need to be in place, especially tree coverage.
Yeah, that pool, you will get sunburned and real quick out
No
there.
doubt.
There's
No
nothing to
doubt.
guard you.
Yeah, it's a gym. Like, I couldn't recommend more for people to go and see the space, because in all forms of recreation, it's top tier. Just no one knows about it. If you like mountain biking, it has one of the highest drops in the state of Pennsylvania.
I didn't know that.
For mountain biking. So I mean,
I've tried running it though, and my calves did not appreciate it.
if you like trail running, there's a little bit more of a challenge. There's a lot of things that are of importance to the recreation community in that space. We just got to preserve it.
Well, I want to talk about a little bit of the organization itself and kind of how you got started with that. I hear it was spun out of Venture Outdoors.
Yeah.
They're an older organization in our city. You started as their director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. What was that experience like?
Yeah. I mean, it was a great experience. I think for me, creating a coalition was of extreme importance, just for my personal story, but also just me moving and being a transplant to the city.
Yeah.
Like, I was able to see a lot of these meccas when it comes to outdoor recreation. Being able to visit Denver, Madison, Wisconsin, like a lot of these places that have the infrastructure in place for inclusivity around recreation.
And CityCast cities, we'll have to give them a shout out.
Yeah, shout out. Yeah. But you come to Pittsburgh and you're like, wow, there's a ton of amenities here, but just not the same amount of recreation. Pittsburgh's the city of cities. Like, everybody has their little township or specific space that they recreate in. But it's like, you go to some of these other cities and everyone's crossing bridges or borders to recreate in an asset that they feel a high affinity to, and the community welcomes that group in and recreates alongside the members. And when I moved here, I was like, I don't see that.
No, Pittsburghers actually make a joke of it. They're not going to cross a bridge.
Yeah.
They're not going to cross a river.
I mean, it's like the running joke. So I mean, I move here and I see that, and I'm like, wow, this is crazy. Pittsburgh has literally every amenity that I kind of grew up in with Asheville, of rivers, mountains, ski resorts, a trail that's, expansive. But I don't see my community on it. So, that's how the coalition was built.
Yeah.
So that's what we're doing now as an organization, a nonprofit. Just kind of continued to expedite our need to transition into a 501c3 status, and that's where we are today.
Well, let's talk about some of those goals. Greater community participation, of course, but how do you imagine the coalition being able to step in and maybe, speak to, for example, a master plan of a space, or, kind of do you want an advisory capacity? Do you want hands in the dirt? What are you feeling?
Yeah, all of the above. I mean, we're already doing a lot of those things. So, like, we collaborate very intentionally with the Westinghouse Park master plan.
Oh, that's a big one.
Yeah, and it matters a lot to us because of the intersections of the community. Homewood and Point Breeze, I mean, the demographics are very different, but the coalition definitely steps in and has, a flag in the ground with making sure Black and brown students from Westinghouse High School are actively involved in this process too, because that's what's important to us. Is like, I know progress and development is slow, but we need to start thinking about the next generation and involving them through the whole process, because I'm searching for someone that's going to replace me. I mean, like a DEI role, a DEI manager, director, like in a perfect world, there's not a me. I'm just another one of our colleagues walking down the street that cares a lot about recreation, but doesn't have to say I'm a Black man in this space. So
Yeah.
I'm looking for that now and trying to instill that, because 20, 30 years from now, I'm hoping that we can just be anyone else that cares about these spaces and can, step up and provide for the community in a fashion that historically hasn't been represented.
Yeah. Well, I mean, even speaking to the roots, Venture Outdoors, full disclosure, I was on their junior board for a little while. We were glorified party planners and dissolved during the pandemic. But
I love that.
So many of the conversations that we had with what we called the big board,
come on.
folks who actually worked there were around, trying to figure out, like, they just seem totally stumped about how to include Black and brown people in their planning.
Yeah.
And, they do so much in Pittsburgh public schools, but the way most adults interact with them has to do with these, really nice hikes and good ways to interact with the community. But they're mostly cis, white,
Yeah.
hetero, wealthy, and older. And that doesn't necessarily speak to the Pittsburgh that I think a lot of us see every day.
Mm-hmm. For sure. Yeah. I mean, we could get down a rabbit hole. Not to to disrespect any organization, because that's not my intentions. It's just we have to frame our mindset differently. Like, communities live this every day. So like that's what's important to me personally is I mean, family to me is what you make of it. And Pittsburgh is my family right now. Like, is there a way that Black and brown families can find a connection outdoors through programs that either I facilitate or through a space that has been developed to include them, is a constant mission of myself. So, the ski program, the camping program that I facilitate, that's just a child, like I nurture that and care for that and invest so much time in that because I see what it did for me personally. And those connections have to be established, rooted, and definitely nurtured appropriately.
Can you give me some hard examples of something that you want to accomplish maybe in the next year?
Well, I think I'm kind of a data person because I think that's extremely important. Like, if you can display the importance of interaction through data, then you're making real drastic change and intentional change. So for me, I think the camping program that we have, the urban camping, if 100 students specifically in a segmentation, the north side, complete this program and go through the camping program, I think that's a success in year one. Now, as we continue to expand and kind of proliferate the importance of this tool and this asset, camping in our regional parks to further facilitate exploration, then it becomes, to me, like one kid from every block in the city of Pittsburgh has been through our program, has camped in a localized park, because that's a story that needs to be told. Mm-hmm. That's the true interactions with nature and community that no other city would be able to say. So,
is camping allowed in the city of Pittsburgh and Pittsburgh parks?
Well, there's some complexity around this. So I would say, I
think I've heard this complaint before, actually.
Yeah. So I would say,
not complaint, roadblock, barrier.
The context of everything is the coalition ever since 2019 has been pushing for an urban camping designation. There's other cities that have this. What we're really intentional on is providing a designation this year through the legislation that has been approved that would allow groups of after-school care educators, anyone who takes youth and family out, to apply for a permit that would allow you 24-hour access to Riverview Park. And just one site. It's called Watson's Cabin. It's going to be a campground. The community's 10-year goal there is to revitalize the site, because it used to be a site that would host the Boy Scouts for trips back in like the 70s.
You can tell it used to be cute. I'll put it that way.
It used to be cute. I love that. Yeah, it has a lot of history that, again, it's just those stories that historically have kind of been lost and thrown to the wayside. And there's just, ancestors in the community that are holding on to a story that, it has profound meaning. And when you turn it into a modern amenity, it becomes so much more profound and impactful. So, yeah, I mean, the hope is to have students camping there this summer, and continuing to expand a pilot program to reach into other regional parks.
And maybe it sparks a passion that, grows into something big where they do want to do a backcountry trip, or they do want to talk all their friends,
exactly,
5 years down the line in college and to go in to do something. But that's because they were exposed as 9 or 10-year-olds in the city of Pittsburgh.
Exactly. Yeah, exploration starts anywhere, but I want it to be in our backyard. So that's important.
Yeah. And then you're also working on addressing incidents when people are targeted based on their identity.
Yeah, that's a big one. We created an inclusionary incident report, and I think the importance of it is so profound with the intersections of what we do. So as an organization, we're like, oh yeah, we produce programs, but like we can't prevent people from from going outside and getting racially targeted or seeing, hearing, or experiencing something that will stick with them and actually never provide them the thought of going back outside again.
You can create resources, but you can't keep the community from
For sure.
ruining it.
Yeah. So that's how the Inclusionary Incident Report was established, was to provide a tool publicly accessible for community to say, hey, I just kind of had this weird experience where, I'm disabled and there's no ADA accessibility in this space.
Mm-hmm.
That's not an awesome experience, but we want you to report it so we can quantify that year over year. If you start to think about some of the public spaces, if you can say 10%, so like 5 out of 50 people that recreated in that space had some kind of racialized incident, that's what causes real change because there's data to support it. So,
And are those reports that you plan to put out, annually, semi-annually, something like that?
yeah, quarterly is the frequency. We had one report go out in 2022 for quarter 4. So we have some data that's available as we speak on that.
What'd you find?
High frequency of people being racially targeted on the Gap Trail, at least by the reports that we received. But again, we haven't cross-referenced that with a full year of data, and also we haven't quantified it as a per interaction experience. So like I don't know how, they haven't released yet how many people hit the Gap Trail last year.
Right, yeah.
So once that is available, I can start to kind of break things down and see the frequency of these things. But obviously you can see the importance of this once we end 2024 and 2025. It's like we have a solid data set at that point of 2-3 years of information. We can start to track not only the frequency, but if it's increasing or decreasing based off of someone kind of touching the levers and manipulating the marketplace and the spaces that we hold. So we need to start to understand that, and that level of detail intersects in so many different fashions,
And that's just one small space.
Just one.
So you're collecting data from any outdoor space in or around the city.
Any, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, imagine the impact that that we could have. So, yeah, I think as we continue to receive data, because it's coming in, and we're able to collaborate with public land managers and space holders, there's a lot of positive change that could come out of this. So I'm excited for the fact that we've established a tool that the community feels comfortable in using, for one, but two, that there's communication with the city of Pittsburgh, Allegheny County Parks and Rec.
Are they taking it seriously?
DCNR, yeah, that actually care about this stuff, because it'd be different if we were just collecting it and didn't see any impact.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're actually seeing some change occur in these spaces, which is really cool.
Marcus Schaffner is still a somewhat new Pittsburgher. We're so glad you moved to the city. Thank you for the work you're doing around this and our outdoor spaces.
Thank you.
A little more news before you go. Speaking of the outdoors, new artwork is popping up in the city's 5 public parks, including a mural honoring the birds of Shenley Park, a climbable yellow fence by the Highland Park Pool, and an abstract steel sculpture in Emerald View Park. WESA's Bill O'Driscoll reports that Frick and Riverview are getting new art too. The installations were designed by artists from all over the country, including a few Pittsburghers, and funded through a grant from the Allegheny Regional Asset District. And a little Pens update. Leadership waited exactly 0 minutes to fire the general manager, Ron Hextall, missing the playoffs for the first time in 16 years with 3 older and very expensive player anchors isn't great for your job security. President of Hockey Operations Brian Burke and Assistant GM Chris Pryor are also out. A search is underway. That's all for today here on CityCast Pittsburgh. If you've got an idea for the show or you just want to say hey, get in our DMs. That's at CityCastPGH on Instagram and on Twitter, or send us an email, pittsburgh@citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Talk to you soon. You got some big goals.
Well, you got to shoot for the stars.